Now for something completely different. Photography and the Colorado River have been entwined intimately ever since the Powell expeditions. If you'd like to read a couple of books, plug here, that have a lot of information about photographers and the river, I recommend a new book by my friend Steve Trimble about the Grand Canyon called Lasting Light, which has a wonderful, probably the best description of the history of photography in the Grand Canyon. And then one of my books called Plateau Province, which is also out there, also has a long history of photographers and their connections to the Colorado Plateau. I noticed I was scheduled after lunch. I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but providing people who've just had lunch with a warm, dark place and comfortable, maybe chairs, is the ideal environment for a power nap, I think. But my show's pretty short, so if you nod out, you'll miss most of it. And I try to use my somewhat atrophied school teacher voice to kind of keep you awake if I can. I guess I'm the token artist here today, and I'm very honored to be in that position. I first read Dr. Stegner's work when I was a college student in the Midwest, with plans to move to Utah after graduation and spend my life exploring the Colorado Plateau. Kind of grandiose plans, but when you're 23 years old, it seems like it might be possible. But it's a dream that I have been firmly committed to for over 30 years now. And although my explorations are still ongoing, I have a horrible cold from spending all last week at Escalante in the in the blizzard that was there at times. And I'm under the influence of powerful cold medicine, so please bear with me. Anyway, I've been very lucky to explore and see and experience probably more of this region, the Colorado Plateau, than but a handful of people, and I am so grateful that I've been able to do that. Stegner's books were an inspiration to me then as now, and I learned from them, for example, about the story of Everett Roos, who has become the model for those of us who seem destined to obsessively wander the high desert country. As Dr. Stegner said so well, no region in America, so far as I know in the world, has a comparable power to evoke from human beings such responses as surprise, delight, and above all, religious terms. Above all, awe. On people of sensibility, he said, this country imposes itself in religious terms. Earth not as fertile mother, but as remote, austere, and impersonal power, humbling to the human ego. Time here is geological. The sky breathes the cold wind of space. So with those words in mind, I'll turn to the subject at hand, the Colorado River and its tributaries, and my brief group of images here called the Flowing Desert. When thinking about how to arrange these images, I tried a couple of different ideas, but I thought maybe a personal kind of narrative about my experiences with the rivers of the Colorado Plateau worked as well as anything. So I can press the right button here. I just have to provide this legal information here. And information for geeks and nerds. And boy, I think we could use the lights now, frankly. Is that possible? Yeah, let's get them completely down. Sorry. I didn't know what it would look like. I think it would be much better with the lights on. Okay, that's good. Yeah. And all of my slide shows the dozens that I've given over. Mexican hat provides the river runner with the opportunity to view some of the most fantastic ancestral Puebloan what's going on, but it's... Thank you. Anyway, as I walked back from the point to my car, the sun came up and the whole world began to move totally alienly, and I was so startled because the flat ground was moving and the trail was moving, and all of a sudden things started to crawl up my pant legs and up into my arms and get up into my shoulders and up towards my head. And I was traveling an area that was frequented by millions of Mormon crickets. And so I started to run, and I ran the 4 miles back, squishing probably hundreds of thousands. I mean, as kind of a lapsed Buddhist, it was just really horrible to be killing all these poor Mormon crickets. Eventually I went on to the harder, more difficult rivers like Desolation, Dinosaur, Cataract, and Grand Canyon. And for about 8 years I lived and breathed rivers and photography, even making my way down the Grand Canyon during the great floods of 1983. And this is a spot, this is an aerial view, this is the confluence, and at this point in any cataract trip, this is where, if you're the boatman, you start to kind of get the butterflies in the stomach about what's ahead below you a few miles there, the many times horrendous rapids of Cataract Canyon. And then many trips to the Grand Canyon, which I consider the epitome of all the canyons. Philip Hyde, the wonderful photographer who recently passed away, said that in his experience the Colorado Plateau reached its peak in two places, and they were both completely different. One was Glen Canyon and the other was the Grand Canyon. And of course the only one that we really have left intact is the Grand Canyon. Eventually I became competent enough with camera and boat that I could shoot alone in locations. Like this shot was taken in North Canyon. I was all by myself, and I was able to get in my boat and row through North Canyon Rapid and on down through several other rapids to camp, and I was able to continue to use that technique of boating all by myself to get to places that I wanted to be when the light was good, and then sometimes rowing down into camp at dark. Some more Grand Canyon images. The little Colorado River in all its spectacular glory. My projector is better. I always bring my own equipment, though I didn't use it. I did have to solve a major problem in the photographic process along the way, and it eventually dawned on me after a few years that the beautiful light I was seeking at sunrise and sunset was often thousands of feet above me during the magic hours when the sun was going down or coming up. And to try and include that amazing light and some of the shadowed scene below, I began using effective colorless filters that were commonly used in movies to block out areas that were too bright on film. And this technique eventually became a mainstay of much of my work, whether I was in the painted desert in Arizona or Australia. And nowadays with digital cameras, which I don't use, it's quite easy to overcome this problem. My good luck in river running and photography reached its peak one August day in the Grand Canyon when I climbed to an ancestral Puebloan ruin in the Grand Canyon during a driving rain. I hoped to photograph the ruin on a hill if the sun popped out, as it often does in the desert, and was treated to a double rainbow that appeared to arise from the river itself. Almost too awestruck to work, I quickly got off a few shots of 4x5 film. Since I was quitting my job as a high school teacher to become a full-time photographer, the image was instrumental in moving my career forward when it appeared on the cover of a book edited again by my friend Steve Trimble called Blessed by Light. In ensuing years, my photography work has taken me all over the world, and sometimes away from the rivers of my youth. I still go on 1 or 2 trips a year, usually with the river company that my daughter works for as a guide. Now, with younger people worrying about safety, food, and with them doing all the work, I can actually concentrate much more on my photography, and I can enjoy more fully the mental and emotional peace that the sound of running rivers brings. This is a shot way above the river, above Moab. A spot I go to quite often. It takes quite a journey to get there. Have to drive in a little ways on a 4-wheel drive vehicle and then walk about 4 or 5 miles to get to the edge there. But as I said, besides shooting all the images down at river level, I'm always trying to go, as Terry Tempest Williams says, to the canyon's edge and look off. There's something really wonderful about that impending drop-off that you see maybe from a half mile away or a mile away or maybe 100 yards away, and you're just drawn closer and closer to it, and you get to it and you're rewarded almost always with a scene as beautiful as this, at least where I live. In recent years, I've pursued a different kind of river running, a little more seriously, exploring the little tributaries of the Colorado in small boats with backpacking food and light equipment. These rivers include the Escalante, the San Rafael, the Muddy, and the Dirty Devil. And they require, at the present time, no permits and little advanced preparation. And they really accomplish my original idea of using the river to get heavy equipment into really wild backcountry. All that you need to go on these trips is a sense of adventure and the freedom to run out the door when the river is reaching its peak flow. This is along the Escalante, of course, reflection of massive Stevens Arch, which is just at the mouth of Coyote Gulch. Also an image from a trip down the Escalante. One of the most memorable trips next to the Grand Canyon that I've taken. So I think it's 79 miles from the bridge there at near where Calf Creek comes in, down to the lake. And the river goes very, very fast, and you have to be constantly on your toes. And you also get to explore wonderful side canyons like this one. And I can't imagine, I would suppose that some people do it, but while I was running through on my boat, I just pictured someone trying to bushwhack and do the trip as a hike, and it would be so horrible. There's so much greenery growing along the river that it would just almost be impossible, I think, to do the 79 miles on foot. I'm sure it's been done, but boy. And then I did take a boat through the Zion Narrows too. They let me do that. And of course, inside the Narrows, which is really a big slot canyon, Sometimes the walls are 3,000 feet straight up. You get this effect of blue and yellow light mixing together. The blue from the sky, the blue sky way up above, just a slit, but it still works the blue down in, bounces around several times, and then it mixes with the yellow lights of the walls, and then you get these kind of really subtle pastel purples that occur down in the bottom. They're kind of hard to see with the eye, but they show up on film. The San Rafael River, the part that's runnable in a boat, only takes a few hours if the river's running high, but you get to go through the Wedge Overlook area down below the Grand Canyon of the San Rafael, and you get to see this almost perfect barrier canyon style pictograph in a short side canyon near the river. And you get to see some amazing walls with tremendous desert varnish formations reaching down to the river. And this is a panoramic view of that area from the rim. Why this is not a national park, I really don't understand at all. Right there you've got a river running through essentially Monument Valley landscape with the biggest butte supposedly in Utah, which would probably make it one of the biggest in the world, which is Windowblind Butte. And then some of the other buttes there, Bottleneck. I don't want to steal the next speaker's thunder, but another river has been reborn in Utah in recent years, and that is the Colorado and Glen Canyon. For a few weeks in the last several years, and probably again this year, the shrinking waters of Lake Powell have made the great heart of the old river beat again and revealed wonders I never dreamed that I would be able to see in my lifetime. In many places where the old scorned bathtub ring exists, waterfalls from recent heavy rains have washed down beautiful colors from the layers up above to make an even almost more beautiful facade there with the white against the orange streaks. I don't think it's desert varnish yet. I think that takes much longer to create, but it's still beautiful. Another thing you see, especially between Bullfrog and Escalante, is dozens and dozens of natural arches that instead of being formed in 50 million years have been formed in 50 under the water. And this is one of them. There are many, many others. So you can spend your time hunting all these arches that didn't exist 50 years ago. And there's many other places on the lake where they have occurred also. The walls underneath the water have also been kind of scoured and reshaped and re-sculpted into even more intense patterns, like this pattern. And then something that really amazed me in a side canyon, these trees have been underwater for 50 years, but they're still standing. Now, if you went over and pushed them, they would probably fall down, but they're still there. And then, of course, there's the jewel of the old Glen Canyon, Cathedral in the Desert, which I assumed I would never, ever get to see. But 3 years ago, the river dropped low enough so that you could go in and look at the cathedral. But there was no place to set up a camera at that time, no solid ground anywhere. But 2 years ago, the river dropped another 25 feet or so over what it had been before to this level. I was taking a picture off to the left on a sandbar, and my friend who was with me said, "Come over here and look at this." And I crossed over to the right-hand side, and was amazed at what I saw. The seeps at the base of the waterfall, and again it's a slot canyon, were reflecting both the blue sky and the yellow and red light from the slot canyon effect, and so I got this purple otherworldly glow on the wall there. I saw a photograph taken by Joseph Munch in 1964, and it looked exactly the same. The waterfall at that point now is probably about 80 feet tall, so it's a little bigger than it appears. If there's one message I'd like to leave you with, it's that all these rivers face threats to their very survival, from radioactive tailings ponds on the banks of the Colorado and Moab where I live, to the hundreds of oil and gas wells and pads that are springing up right to the rim of Desolation Canyon. I've seen them from the air. It's amazing. And it's not just Desolation, it's Westwater, and it's Labyrinth too. Even to the wanton destruction of a world-class erosional feature near the White River in northern Utah that was destroyed this fall, probably by vandals. People were coming from all over the world to see it. It was German tourists who first found the feature. It was called the Teapot, in pieces on the ground. But in a time when a perfect storm of environmental destruction seems aimed at these rivers and their corridors, the short return of Glen Canyon has given me hope that maybe all is not lost. This is another thing that happens in Glen Canyon. As the river drops, you get these magnificent reflecting pools. This is another success story. This area above Moab, where the first Moab tram went in, was purchased by the Nature Conservancy, and so now it's being preserved, and the tram was torn down. For a long time we had a second tram, if you've been there, which doesn't operate, at the beginning of town, and we were trying to see if we could get public officials who would go on the record as opposing a third or a fourth tram. Short story about this image. It appeared on the cover of Sierra magazine a few years ago, correctly labeled as Westwater Canyon in Utah. And David Brower, the great environmentalist and former president of the Sierra Club, was on the outs with the club, as he had been for a long time, saw the cover of the magazine, saw the caption, and then was giving speeches all over the country saying to the effect, see how out of touch the Sierra Club is? They put a picture of the Grand Canyon on the cover of their magazine and they call it Utah. So I got a call from the editor and he said, is that really Utah? And of course, it is beautiful Westwater Canyon, squarely within the boundaries of our pretty great state. Rapidly anticline along the San Juan River. Big, really big. San Juan goosenecks before dawn in winter. You can see how I get these colds. The Green River and Stillwater Canyon in Canyonlands National Park. So I continue my quest for beauty, never as eloquently as Everett Roos or as Dr. Stegner, but in their spirit I try to champion through my images the timeless beauty. See here, part of the S-curve of the Bow Knot Bend. And then Westwater Canyon from above. So I try to spirit and I try to champion through my images the timeless beauty and wonder found in the flowing desert. Thank you.
Few minutes for questions. So if anybody'd like to ask a question, I see one over there.
Yes.
Has the delicate arch nighttime photographer been expelled from your fraternity?
It's very helpful if you repeat it for the overflow.
Okay, the question is, the individual who used a fire in the bowl of delicate arch several years ago and was convicted of that crime. Has he been drummed out of the photography community? Well, it's a diverse and wide community, so I don't know if that's really possible. He did send a letter to me asking for forgiveness, and several other photographers too. So I don't really know. We don't have any kind of communication system, I guess, that would really maybe the non-professionals talk about it more than the professionals do, I guess. But I certainly abhor what he did and would hope that, was glad that he was punished for it. Yes, sir.
Do you see progressive changes over your career in air quality?
Absolutely. Boy, do I ever. Changes in air quality. Anecdotally, yes, wow. Big changes. I don't know where it's coming from. Usually it happens in the spring. There are some springs. Last spring, there was probably a 6 to 8 week period in the Moab area where it was really impossible to do a big scenic because the distance of visibility was probably under 5 miles. And I don't know where that stuff is coming from. I don't know whether it's from, sometimes they say it's coming from the Gobi Desert over here. Sometimes they say it's coming from other places in China. Sometimes they say it's coming from Las Vegas, Mexico, maybe close by with the vast proliferation of off-road vehicles and the dust that they stir up. But yeah, there is a big change in the air quality. I can now almost only shoot effectively big scenics after a storm has come through and cleared everything out. And it wasn't that way when I started 30 years ago. Yes, ma'am. Oh, okay. I don't know why I went back to this, but okay. That is an aerial view of the Rapley Anticline, which is an erosional feature. We can back up to that, I think. Maybe. Whoop, too far. There we go. Now, to get it to fill the screen, I don't know if this will work or not. It's an aerial view. Let's try that. Let's see if it comes. Select it. View. View. Okay, now, but that's only a part of it. Got it. There we go. Okay. Yeah, the San Juan River flows right at the base of this. It's not in the picture, but it flows right at the base. And if you travel between Bluff and Mexican Hat and you look off in the distance, you'll see this formation. And I think it's one of the most spectacular aerial photography subjects in the world.
Yeah, sure.
5 minutes. Any other questions? Yes, Steve.
Tom, could you talk a little bit about the use of photography in conservation work and kind of the lineage that you're in having the pictures used to save places?
Yeah, Steve asked about using my images for conservation work. It's a very big part of what I do. I work with local, national, international environmental groups. For example, I work with the Friends of Petra in Jordan, giving them images to protect Petra. My most recent big project is with the Utah Open Lands, and I'm in a multi-year project of photographing all their sites. The coolest one was the Redford property. That was really a lot of fun to go shoot where Jeremiah Johnson was filmed. So it's not all drudgery, believe me. But that work is going to be on display this coming weekend in Moab, and then also in Park City to be announced, and also in Salt Lake City to be announced. But about 20% of my time and my staff's time is spent on pro bono work for environmental groups. Questions? Right there, I can barely see you.
How do you handle a large view camera from an aircraft?
I don't use a view camera in the aircraft. I tried it many times and it never worked. So I use a Pentax 6x7. If you know what that is, it's kind of like a 35 millimeter camera on steroids. It's a medium format camera. It uses roll film. That's what I use for my aerial photographs. Oh, I'm sorry, where? Yes, sir.
Tom, I appreciate your mentioning Everett Lewis. I didn't know him, of course, but I wrote a couple books about him. And I would only regret that you and Everett were of different generations and could not have collaborated on a book with his writing.
Well, yeah, he was mentioning, are you Mr. Rusho? Yes, hi. We've met before. Yes. Mentioning Everett Roos, and yes, I would have loved to have met him at the very least. What an amazing person. One of my most prized possessions is a book of Desert Magazine. I don't know if any of you remember that magazine, but there was a magazine called Desert Magazine, and they used to do a lot of stuff about Everett, and they did a book about him, actually. And one of my most prized possessions is the book they did about Everett Roos in the 40s, signed by his brother. Is brother still alive?
As far as I know.
Yeah, okay. One more.
I'm curious about the mention in your bio that you were inducted into Iowa.
It's true. Well, I started playing guitar when I was about 13 or 14, and I was afraid to go to school because of the bullies. I was a tiny little kid, and the bullies were picking on me, so I stayed home and practiced guitar. And in about a year, the bullies thought I was the greatest thing going. So I played in numerous bands throughout high school and through college. And then I was picked to be inducted into this Hall of Fame in Iowa. I guess every state has their own Hall of Fame now, so it's not like the big Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But it's still fun. It was still a lot of fun to go there and get inducted into that. And it impressed my teenage children, actually. It's about the only thing I've ever done that has impressed them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very